Karen breaks store display TV after seeing herself on the security camera feed. The department store buzzed with activity. The scent of freshly unpacked cardboard, floor wax, and synthetic fabric floated through the air as shoppers swarmed the aisles in pursuit of weekend deals. Kids tugged on their parents' sleeves for toys. Couples debated the merits of different microwave brands, and elderly patrons navigated slowly with carts piled high. Amidst the chaotic harmony of commerce, the doors slid open with a hiss, and in stomped Karen, blonde bob perfectly hairsprayed, sunglasses pushed dramatically atop her head, and an oversized designer handbag swinging with each determined step. Her heels clacked with authority as she made a beeline toward the electronics section, muttering under her breath about how nobody respects coupons anymore. Her jaw was clenched tight, and her phone was already in her hand, recording just in case she needed proof of discrimination or ageism, as she told her Facebook followers earlier that morning. Karen had entered the store on a mission. Last week, she had clipped a store coupon that offered 25% off select electronics. The expiration date had passed 2 days ago, but she believed the intent of the coupon still stood. She claimed it was a matter of principle, that the store owed her that discount for loyalty alone. Her husband had grumbled when she insisted on coming today, sensing from long experience that public conflict was imminent. He had declined to accompany her, muttering something about car repairs, and Karen took that as a sign that she had to handle this injustice alone. She arrived at the electronics section and scanned the displays. Rows of flat screens lined the walls, all flashing bright demo reels of scenic landscapes, sports replays, and brand logos. A small crowd of shoppers milled about, testing headphones, comparing tablets, or admiring the newest ultra-thin models. At the front of the section stood a lanky teenager in a store uniform, nervously adjusting his name tag. His name was Marcus, a college freshman who had started this job 2 weeks ago to save up for textbooks. He didn't see Karen approach until her shadow loomed over the customer service podium. "I need you to price match this," Karen demanded, slapping the expired coupon onto the countertop with exaggerated flair. Marcus flinched slightly but quickly smiled, trying to remain professional. He glanced at the coupon, noted the date, and responded politely, "I'm really sorry, ma'am, but this coupon expired on Thursday. We can't honor it anymore." His tone was even and apologetic, but that only seemed to inflame Karen further. Her voice rose half an octave as she leaned in closer. "I don't think you understand. I came in here last week and you were out of stock. That's not my fault. You owe me this discount, period." Marcus tried to explain the policy again, even offering to call a supervisor to double-check, but Karen interrupted him mid-sentence, raising her voice to a shrill bark that turned heads across the aisle. "So you're telling me that a loyal customer who shops here every single month gets punished for your store's incompetence?" She slapped her palm flat on the counter. "Let me guess. This is because I'm not one of those TikTok influencers you people fawn over. Is that it?" By now, several customers nearby had turned their attention to the brewing scene. A father with his young daughter subtly moved to another aisle. A middle-aged woman with a cart full of discounted DVDs raised an eyebrow and began recording quietly on her phone. Marcus stood frozen, the smile now a tight line on his face as he glanced toward the security camera overhead. Silently hopping someone on the staff was already on their way. Karen was only getting started. "You people always do this. First you hide behind your fake rules, then you gaslight me like I don't know what I'm talking about. I read your website. It says you honor reasonable exceptions. This is a reasonable exception." She gestured wildly, accidentally knocking a stack of product brochures off the counter. As Marcus bent to pick them up, Karen rolled her eyes and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Unbelievable. This generation is allergic to work." As if on cue, a large screen overhead flickered briefly, transitioning from a commercial for noise-canceling headphones to the live feed from the store's internal security system. The screens rotated views every few seconds, a view of the checkout lanes, the parking lot, and finally, the electronics department. One of the feeds paused, freezing for a moment on Karen's current tantrum in all its dramatic glory. Her face, contorted in frustration, was blown up to 70 inches of glorious HD, right above the very spot she stood. The shift in Karen's demeanor was instantaneous. She paused mid-rant, catching a glimpse of herself on the monitor. Her mouth hung slightly open as she watched the footage, her finger wagging, the aggressive gestures, the exaggerated posture. Her voice wavered as she stepped back, realizing not just the employees, but now at least a dozen shoppers were watching both her and the playback simultaneously. "What is that?" she demanded, pointing at the screen. Marcus, still crouched gathering papers, looked up and said, "That's the live camera feed, ma'am. They loop through different areas of the store." Karen's eyes darted between the monitor, the employees, and the customers now whispering to one another, some of them clearly stifling laughs. Her face flushed with a mix of humiliation and rage. "This is harassment," she shouted, voice breaking into a screech. "You don't have my permission to record me. This is illegal. You people are sick." She fumbled with her phone, threatening to call the police, then paused. Her gaze locked onto a nearby end cap where discounted apparel and accessories were crammed haphazardly together. She lunged toward it. Before Marcus or anyone else could react, Karen grabbed a size 11 stiletto heel from the clearance rack and turned back toward the TV screen, which still showed her frozen in mid-yell. With a furious scream, she hurled the shoe upward with all her strength. The heel struck the screen dead center. The impact produced a loud crack, a ripple of spider-webbed glass, and a sharp pop as the display fizzled and went dark. For a long, heavy second, no one moved. Then gasps erupted from all around as Karen stood panting, chest heaving, her hands still trembling from the force of the throw. The silence that followed felt deafening, broken only by the clatter of a phone slipping from a stunned shopper's hand. Marcus slowly rose to his feet, eyes wide in disbelief. He didn't speak. He couldn't. A store manager, having heard the commotion from across the building, emerged from the corner and surveyed the damage. His jaw dropped as he took in the shattered TV, the stunned crowd, and Karen still defiantly holding her purse like a weapon of righteousness. Karen, oblivious to the severity of what she'd just done, puffed out her chest and declared, "That's what you get for messing with me." Then she turned toward Marcus, pointing a trembling finger in his face. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." The manager reached for his walkie-talkie. All across the store, the situation had gone from awkward to explosive, and it wasn't over yet. The aftermath of the shattered television felt surreal, as if time had slowed, and all the energy of the store had been sucked into the broken screen that now hung limp and useless above the electronics display. Shards of the outer casing had fallen to the linoleum floor in sharp-edged pieces, and the once glowing monitor now sputtered and blinked. The glass fractured in spiderweb lines radiating out from the center of impact. Karen stood at the epicenter of it all, chest heaving, face flushed a blotchy crimson, lips curled in self-righteous fury, as though she had just struck a blow for justice and expected applause to follow. The onlookers, however, remained eerily silent. Some had backed away instinctively after the shoe was thrown, while others stood frozen in place, their phones still raised, capturing every second. It was only a matter of time before those videos exploded online, but in that moment, the store existed in a suspended haze of disbelief, interrupted only by the steady approach of heavy footsteps. The manager arrived with the weariness of someone who had seen too much in retail and hoped to see no more today. His name tag read Steve, floor manager, and he wore a company polo a size too tight across his stomach, which he absently tugged at as he scanned the damage. His eyes passed from the broken TV to the flustered Marcus, then to Karen, who stood with her arms folded, glaring at him like he was late to a meeting she hadn't scheduled. "What happened here?" he asked, his voice low but firm, hopping to regain some sense of control. Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but Karen jumped in first, her tone thick with accusation and condescension. "I was provoked," she snapped, jabbing her finger toward the ceiling-mounted camera as if it had personally insulted her. "You people humiliated me, broadcasting my face to the entire store without my consent while that incompetent child refused to honor my discount. That is illegal surveillance, and I demand compensation." She gestured broadly at the screen she just destroyed, either oblivious or indifferent to the irony. Her voice carried across the aisle, shrill and indignant, drawing a few more wandering shoppers into the gathering crowd. Steve blinked once slowly and turned back to Marcus. "Can you give me a quick version?" he asked. Marcus nodded numbly, still visibly shaken, and recounted the encounter: Karen's expired coupon, the refusal, her escalating volume, and finally, the moment she saw herself on the camera feed and reacted with violence. As he spoke, Steve's expression tightened. He was no stranger to unruly customers. He had worked retail for 15 years and had weathered everything from shoplifters to fights in the toy aisle. But something about this woman's unhinged entitlement made the air around them feel volatile. Karen interrupted Marcus again, slapping her palm on the counter. "This is all irrelevant. Your employee disrespected me and your cameras invaded my privacy. I should be the one filing charges." Her eyes flashed as she turned toward the crowd. "Does anyone here actually agree with how this store treats customers? Is this how you do business now?" A few people in the crowd scoffed and someone muttered, "Lady, you smashed the TV." Another voice chimed in, "She's gonna be famous by dinner time." Karen whirled around, spotting a teenager laughing behind their phone screen. "Delete that video right now," she barked, storming toward the teen, who backed away quickly. She reached out as if to snatch the phone, but the teen slipped behind another shopper, and in that moment Karen's overstep was clear to everyone. Steve stepped forward, holding out his hand as a barrier. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and step away from other customers. You've damaged store property, and your behavior is becoming threatening. I'm going to have to ask you to wait here while we call security." Karen's eyes widened in theatrical disbelief, as though she couldn't comprehend that she was the one being reprimanded. "Call security, me? Are you insane? I am the victim," she cried, backing away as if retreating would somehow reset the situation. "I won't be detained like some criminal. I have a right to defend myself from being filmed without consent. I'm calling the police myself." She fumbled through her bag, yanking out her phone with such force that a half-used bottle of hand sanitizer flew onto the floor. With shaking hands, she tapped at the screen, loudly declaring to the air, "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a crime. I was just assaulted in a department store and they're trying to cover it up." Steve sighed audibly. He pulled out his walkie-talkie and muttered to the receiver, "Security to electronics, we've got a code 5. Vandalism, possibly escalating." Karen, still on the phone, had begun spinning her version of events with increasing dramatics, claiming she had been broadcast like a zoo animal, and that the store was conspiring with teenagers to frame her. The operator on the other end of the line seemed to be asking questions, because Karen's face twitched with irritation. "Yes, the TV is broken. Yes, I threw something, but it wasn't my fault. I was provoked, intentionally provoked. You'll understand when you see the footage." Steve turned to Marcus and gestured toward the back. "Why don't you go take your break now? I'll handle the rest." Marcus nodded gratefully, his shoulders slumping with relief as he backed away from the chaos. Meanwhile, Karen continued ranting into her phone, now packing in tight circles like a caged tiger. She seemed to be losing steam, however. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the gravity of what she'd done had begun to chip away at her wall of indignant defiance. A few minutes later, 2 store security officers arrived. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter but radiating authority. Karen immediately snapped her attention toward them, launching into a breathless explanation full of half-truths and exaggerated slights. "They turned the entire store against me," she insisted. "It's public humiliation. That's emotional abuse. They tricked me into reacting and then recorded me doing it." The taller guard looked at Steve, who simply pointed at the broken screen and said, "She threw a shoe at the display. It's all on our cameras. We've got witnesses and phone footage from multiple angles." The shorter guard nodded slowly and turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, We're going to need you to wait in the front office while we review the footage and talk with law enforcement. This is no longer just a customer service issue, it's property damage." Karen recoiled, horrified. "Wait in the back, like some criminal. Absolutely not, I know my rights. I will not be locked up or interrogated over this." But even as she protested, her eyes darted nervously toward the crowd, still growing, still recording. The tide had turned, and somewhere deep down, Karen realized that the public narrative was slipping from her fingers. Her grip on control, on perception, on the image she so desperately tried to maintain, had cracked just like the TV she destroyed. And now, all she could do was cling to denial, as the walls began closing in around her. Karen stood motionless for a moment, her breath coming in shallow huffs as the weight of what was happening finally started to settle on her shoulders. The sound of murmuring voices, shifting feet, and faint laughter in the distance all felt like sharp needles digging into her pride. Her eyes darted around for an escape, some loophole, some sympathy, someone to validate her version of the truth. But all she saw were people recording, whispering, or avoiding her gaze entirely. The crowd had grown, drawn in by the spectacle and now thoroughly invested in the unraveling drama. Her phone hung loosely in her hand, the emergency call she had placed moments ago now reduced to nothing more than background noise as the operator's voice continued asking, "Ma'am, are you safe? Are you in immediate danger?" She ended the call without answering, stuffing the device deep into her purse with jittery fingers. The security officers waited, their stances neutral but firm, clearly used to handling these kinds of outbursts but not particularly interested in engaging further unless she escalated again. Steve, the manager, watched Karen carefully, arms folded, his expression one of exasperated patience. He had long ago learned that people like her didn't respond well to being directly challenged. Instead, they spun louder, faster, and more aggressively until they collapsed under the weight of their own narratives. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we're not taking you to a holding cell. We're not locking you up. We're asking you to walk to the front office so we can get your side of the story while we review the camera footage. That's all. It's policy after an incident involving destruction of property. If you cooperate, this doesn't have to go any further than a conversation and a damage report." Karen narrowed her eyes, the muscle in her jaw twitching. Her pride screamed at her to resist, to storm out, to declare that she was being unfairly persecuted, to threaten a class-action lawsuit against corporate injustice. But she could feel it, the invisible wall closing around her. Walking out now would look like fleeing. Screaming more would make her appear unhinged. And worst of all, the evidence wasn't on her side. In that brief, horrifying moment when she had seen her own reflection on the monitor, captured mid-tantrum, something in her had cracked, and she knew deep down that her actions were unjustifiable. But that knowledge warred with her ego, refusing to be voiced aloud. "I want my lawyer present," she muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. "You can absolutely contact your lawyer," the shorter security guard replied, voice steady. "No one's arresting you. We just need you to sit with us while we go over what happened. You'll be allowed to make calls, explain yourself, and see the footage we're reviewing, but you need to cooperate now." A few tense seconds passed before Karen finally gave a jerky nod. She adjusted her purse strap, stood up straighter, and began walking toward the front of the store, flanked by the guards who gave her just enough space not to make it feel like an escort, though to the watching crowd, that's exactly what it was. Whispers followed her like shadows, and she could feel the sting of judgment behind every phone camera still held aloft. She kept her eyes straight ahead, feigning dignity, even as her stomach churned with the sour bile of humiliation. As they neared the front office, a woman in a gray blazer approached Angela, the store's assistant manager. Her presence was cool and commanding, and she greeted Karen with a clipped but professional tone. "Ms. Karen," she said sharply. "Karen," Angela echoed, nodding. "We're going to sit in this office here, review the footage together, and get a formal statement from you. We'll also collect statements from our employee and any customer witnesses who have volunteered video. The police have already been contacted, per protocol, since this involves property damage over $1,000. They'll want to speak with you as well, so it's best we sort everything clearly and quickly. Please have a seat." Karen blinked rapidly, her cheeks burning again. "You called the police?" she asked, her voice a hushed rasp, somewhere between incredulity and fear. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." Angela didn't flinch. "Your explanation is part of the process, not a replacement for it. We're treating this incident seriously. That television costs over $1,200 and was destroyed in a public setting with multiple witnesses. Regardless of intent, it's a legal issue now." Karen slowly lowered herself into the chair, the cushion stiff and uncomfortable beneath her. She pulled her phone out again, staring at it blankly as though waiting for it to tell her what to do. She thought about calling her husband, but the idea of him hearing what happened made her cringe. He had warned her to let it go, to not push the expired coupon, to just buy a new TV online like a normal person. She imagined the disappointment in his voice, the long pause he'd take before saying, "You didn't really throw something at the TV, did you?" That silence would kill her more than any arrest. Angela sat across from her, opened a laptop, and turned the screen so that both women could see it. With a few quick clicks, the surveillance footage queued up. There was no sound, but the video needed none. Karen watched as the scene played out, her storming up to Marcus, waving her arms, packing back and forth in fury, then suddenly grabbing the shoe and hurling it with startling force. The moment of impact was clear, dramatic, and inescapable. Karen winced, seeing herself from the outside for the first time. She looked deranged, not assertive, not powerful, just angry, wild-eyed, and irrational. Angela didn't say anything. She let the video play again, slower this time. Karen cleared her throat. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was angry, sure, but I didn't mean to cause real damage. Her voice trailed off as she realized how thin the excuse sounded. "We're not judging intent yet," Angela said. "That's for the report. We're simply documenting the facts. You threw the shoe. The screen broke. Multiple witnesses recorded it. One employee had to step away due to distress. That's all going in the file." Karen's throat felt dry and she took a shaky breath. "I can pay for the screen," she offered, voice softer now. "Can we just settle this quietly?" Angela looked at her evenly. "That may be possible, depending on what the police decide when they arrive. But that decision won't be made in this room. You still need to provide a full written statement. And Karen, I suggest being completely honest in it. Because if you try to twist the truth and those recordings show otherwise, it won't help you." Karen sat back, defeated, eyes fixed on the looping footage of her own outburst, playing over and over like a slow-motion car crash. The public performance was over now, the curtain pulled down, but backstage, the real world, was just beginning its judgment. Karen sat in the hard plastic chair of the department store's front office, her fingers nervously entwined and twisting as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The sterile room, filled with the faint scent of printer toner and hand sanitizer, felt more suffocating than any courtroom she'd imagined. The silence between her and Angela stretched like taut wire, punctuated only by the muted clicks of the assistant manager typing notes on her laptop. Despite her earlier bluster, Karen now felt a gnawing discomfort building in her chest, a creeping awareness that she might have gone too far. Still, her pride clung stubbornly to the belief that she had been wronged. She tried to focus on that idea, to summon the righteous fury she had felt only minutes earlier, but every time she glanced at the paused surveillance video showing her mid-throw, arm cocked and mouth open in a furious scream, the illusion cracked a little more. The knock at the door was soft but commanding, and before Angela could respond, the door opened to reveal two police officers stepping into the room. One was tall and broad with a calm, unreadable expression. The other was older, his silver hair clipped close, with crow's feet framing a pair of observant eyes that scanned the scene in an instant. Karen's breath hitched in her throat, and she instinctively smoothed her blouse and sat up straighter, trying to look composed. Angela greeted them and gestured for them to sit. She explained the situation with remarkable efficiency, describing the destruction of the television, the eyewitness accounts, the store's internal footage, and the employee who had to be excused due to emotional distress. The older officer, whose name tag read SGT, Latham, nodded thoughtfully throughout, asking only a few clarifying questions. The other officer, younger and quiet, began reviewing the footage on Angela's laptop, while Latham turned his attention fully to Cairn. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he regarded her with an expression that was neither hostile nor particularly sympathetic, just measured. It was the look of someone who had seen too many versions of the same story unfold, and knew that the facts often spoke louder than the people involved. Cairn, sensing the moment to speak was now or never, tried to gather herself into a persona of calm authority. "Officer," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I know what this looks like, but I need you to understand I was provoked. I was humiliated in front of a crowd, shown on a screen without my permission while being mistreated by an employee. I acted out of instinct. I didn't mean to break anything or hurt anyone. I just snapped for a moment." Latham nodded once but didn't interrupt. He waited for her to continue, his silence inviting more honesty than interrogation ever could. "The coupon I had, it had just expired," she continued, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "But they refused to honor it. They wouldn't even call a supervisor. And then when I saw myself on that giant screen, broadcast like I was some sideshow attraction, it pushed me over the edge. I've had a very hard week, you understand. It wasn't like I came in here planning to cause trouble." He finally spoke, his voice even and direct. "Ma'am, I do understand that sometimes people have bad days, but when bad days lead to property damage and threats toward employees, we have to treat it seriously. Now I've seen the footage. You were angry, that much is clear, but no one touched you. No one followed you or tried to shame you publicly. That camera feed was standard store surveillance. It's posted in every department for theft deterrence. The feed rotates every few seconds. You weren't singled out." Cairn blinked rapidly. "But people were watching me, they laughed, they took out their phones, that screen only showed what you were already doing," Latham said firmly, but not unkindly. "Your reaction to seeing yourself wasn't caused by the screen. It was caused by what you were doing in front of it. And what you did after, throwing an object at a television in a public store full of people, that's not something we can ignore." Angela slid a printed document across the desk toward Latham. "These are the witness statements so far. We've had 4 people offer video, and 2 others confirmed that the employee followed protocol and remained professional." Latham reviewed the document briefly and let out a long breath. He turned back to Cairn. "You're lucky no one was injured. That heel could have ricocheted or hit someone nearby, and it's fortunate the employee you yelled at didn't suffer a panic attack or worse." Cairn flushed red and shook her head. "I apologized. I told her I could pay for the damage." "An apology doesn't undo the damage, ma'am, but it's a start," Latham replied. He tapped a few notes into a small notepad. "We're not taking you in today. The store has agreed to let you leave after this conversation, but they are pressing charges for destruction of property and will be forwarding a report to the prosecutor's office. You'll receive a court date in the mail within the next few weeks. If you comply, pay restitution, and this is your first offense, it may be eligible for a diversion program or settlement out of court. But that's not up to us. Our job is to make sure the facts are clear and that everyone involved is safe." Cairn's heart dropped into her stomach. Court, prosecutor, charges. The words sounded like they were meant for criminals, not people like her. Her throat tightened and she nodded slowly, unable to find words that didn't sound hollow or panicked. Latham closed his notebook and stood, as did his partner. "You'll be free to go shortly," he said. "But I'd strongly advise you not to return to this location. The store is issuing a ban, effective immediately." Angela stepped forward, handing Cairn a copy of the store's trespass notice. "You're banned from all regional locations. Any future entry will be considered criminal trespassing. We'll also be mailing a copy of this notice to your listed address." She said it plainly, not cruelly, but the humiliation felt sharp anyway. Karen accepted the paper with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning it numbly. As the officers exited, Angela offered Karen one last look, more pity than disdain. "You're not the first to lose your temper," she said. "But actions have consequences, especially when other people are watching. We're not out to ruin your life. We just want to protect our staff and make sure this doesn't happen again." Karen stood, shaky on her feet. The purse that had once been a symbol of her confidence now felt like a heavy burden slung over her shoulder. She didn't speak as she left the office, escorted by a security guard through a side exit away from the main floor. As the door shut behind her and she stepped into the sweltering daylight of the parking lot, the noise of the store faded away, replaced by the rush of passing cars and the dull hum of reality. Her car felt miles away, though it was only 3 rows down. Each step toward it felt like a march of shame. The fire of her earlier rage had burned out completely, leaving behind nothing but a deep, hollow embarrassment she couldn't shake. The following weeks passed in a fog of anxiety, silence, and spiraling self-reflection that Karen could neither control nor ignore. At first, she tried to pretend it was all a misunderstanding that would blow over. She stayed offline for a few days, telling herself she just needed space, that the video thing would fade like everything else on the internet. But curiosity got the better of her, and when she finally opened her phone and typed in her own name, the flood hit her like a tidal wave. The video of her tantrum had been uploaded by a bystander less than an hour after she left the store. In just days, it had been reposted, shared, and remixed thousands of times. There were slow-motion edits of the shoe flying through the air, dubbed-over versions with dramatic opera music, and even parodies where comedians reenacted her meltdown in costume. The title alone, "Karen Goes Full Gladiator on Department Store TV," was plastered across dozens of content farm sites, most of which were monetizing her embarrassment for easy clicks. Karen watched the original footage only once in full. The first time she heard her own voice raised in that shrill, righteous rage echoing through the sterile department store, her stomach turned. She hadn't realized how wild she looked. Her eyes bulging, her body language aggressive, her tone utterly unhinged. It was like watching a stranger. Yet there was no denying it. Every gesture, every word, every sneer had been hers. The worst part wasn't the video itself, but the comments. Thousands of strangers, some with fake names and cartoon avatars, mocking her looks, her voice, her sense of entitlement. Some called her dangerous. Others speculated about her family, suggesting she was probably the kind of mother who screamed at waiters and blamed teachers for her children's bad grades. The cruelty was staggering, but what stung most was the truth hidden beneath their ridicule. She had become exactly what people feared when they heard the word Karen, and there was no hiding from it. Her husband, who had tried to stay neutral at first, grew distant. At dinner, he barely spoke. On weekends, he found excuses to leave the house. When the mail finally arrived with the official court summons and restitution request, over $2,000 in damages and legal processing, he said nothing. He simply placed the envelope on the kitchen table and left the room. Karen stared at it for a long time, unable to even touch it, the stark lettering on the front making her feel like a child being called to the principal's office. The ban notice from the store chain had come a day earlier, formally banning her from all locations for 5 years. It had her full name printed in bold, along with a still frame of her mid-scream, as if she were a wanted criminal. She shoved it into a drawer, unable to throw it away, yet unwilling to look at it again. Her lawyer, a tired man with heavy eyes and a no-nonsense tone, advised her to take the settlement deal the prosecutor's office offered. It would keep the incident off her permanent record if she agreed to attend an anger management program, pay the restitution in full, and avoid any further public incidents for a year. It was a lifeline, one she hadn't expected, and she grabbed it with shaky gratitude. The program met every Tuesday evening in a beige community center room that smelled faintly of instant coffee and carpet cleaner. The group consisted of 12 people, most of whom looked just as uncomfortable being there as she did. Some had yelled at coworkers, others had broken things at home. A few were teenagers sent by their parents after getting into fights at school. Karen didn't speak the first 2 sessions, choosing instead to sit quietly and listen. But as the weeks went by, she began to recognize something in their stories, a thread of pain, frustration, and desperation that mirrored her own. When it was finally her turn to speak, she didn't launch into excuses or justifications. She simply said, "I saw myself in a way I never wanted to be seen." Her voice cracked when she said it, but no one mocked her. No one rolled their eyes. The group counselor, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, nodded and asked her what she'd learned since then. Karen paused, trying to put it into words. That being right doesn't always matter, that how I make people feel matters more. It wasn't a profound statement, but it was honest. And for the first time in weeks, she felt the tiniest spark of clarity, like a crack of sunlight slipping through closed blinds. She completed the course and made the payments on time, even though it meant giving up her gym membership and canceling a weekend getaway she'd planned months earlier. The TV incident had become a permanent line in her life's timeline, before the video and after. She could no longer walk through public spaces without wondering if someone recognized her. She changed her hairstyle, avoided eye contact in crowds, and found herself lowering her voice even in casual conversations, afraid of being labeled or recorded again. The paranoia was subtle but ever present, like a shadow that never left. One day, while waiting in line at the grocery store, she saw a young man being berated by a customer at the self-checkout. The man looked barely 20, his face pale as he tried to explain that he couldn't override the system without a supervisor's code. The woman yelling at him reminded Karen a little too much of herself. Sharp, impatient, entitled. Karen's fingers clenched around her cart handle as she watched the boy flinch slightly under the barrage. She stepped forward without thinking. "Excuse me," she said, voice steady. "There's no need to yell at him. He's doing his job. If you need help, I'm sure a manager can be paged." The woman scowled but said nothing. She walked off in a huff and the boy looked at Karen, startled. He gave a small, grateful nod before returning to the kiosk. Karen returned to her spot in line, her heart pounding, not from adrenaline or anger but from something quieter, something like healing. Later, as she loaded groceries into her trunk, she looked at her reflection in the car window. The woman staring back wasn't the same one from the viral video. The anger had faded. The defensiveness had dulled. In its place was something more human. Flawed, yes, but aware of it now. She knew she couldn't erase what had happened. The internet wouldn't forget, and some people would always recognize her. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel like hiding. She got in the car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot with the windows down, the breeze on her face and a silence that, finally, didn't feel like punishment, but peace.